Good afternoon. I'm Reginald Lewis, Executive Director of the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of our members and guests to the Center's second webinar in our coffee series, brought to you from our campus here in South Orange, New Jersey. The coffee series provides an opportunity to connect the Center's membership to practitioners who can share their stories about the impact of servant leadership on both their personal and professional lives. We kicked off the series on January the 27th with a conversation with the legendary Jack Lowe, former CEO and past chairman of TD Industries, one of America's most successful servant-led companies. We had a great time with Jack and the session's wonderful moderator, Isabel Lopez. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by two, may I say, all-stars from the Center's lineup of trustees, Graham Honaker, Butler University's Executive Director of Principal Gifts and Vice Chair of the Greenleaf Board of Trustees, and co-author of his first, but certainly not last, book, The Cinderella Strategy, the game plan behind Butler University's rise to prominence. This is a fascinating take on how this small university pushed its way into the big leagues of college basketball. But in case you're wondering why the Center for Servant Leadership is talking about a sports program, hang on. As you'll soon find out, the Butler story, or more appropriately, the Butler way, is about more than just basketball. Butler's success on the court permeated throughout the institution, largely due to a culture that embraces caring for others and the value of servanthood. Board Chair and newly appointed COO and CFO of Herff Jones, Jeff Blade, will guide today's discussion with Graham. By the way, congrats, Jeff. But first, a quick word about the Center. Founded in 1964 by our namesake, Robert Greenleaf, for well over 50 plus years, the Center has worked to promote the understanding, awareness, and practice of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. The Center offers an extensive catalog of publications, opportunities for online learning, workshops, and an annual summit. We'll provide a bit more about several upcoming opportunities to become more involved with the Center later in today's program. But let's begin. Jeff, the mic is yours.
Great. Thanks, Reggie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. We have a great discussion ahead. Graham, congratulations on the new book, Cinderella Story. Before we dive in, I want to let everyone know that there will be time for Q&A, so feel free to load your questions into the chat, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So before we dive into the book, I want to confess that I'm biased on the topic. So I am a 1983 graduate of Butler University, and it's part of the reason that Graham and I know each other over the last several years of my continuing involvement there. And one of the things that's unique about Butler is that I think there has always been an underlying element of servant leadership from its founding. So the founder, Ovid Butler, was a pioneer, an abolitionist. He was admitting African Americans and women students before the Civil War. And that grounding for Butler has continued through the years. And during my time there in the late 70s, early 80s, I certainly felt an element of servant leadership. They didn't specifically talk about it. I'm not sure that they had necessarily named it. But in terms of the care that I received from professors and their support and interest in developing young adults, it was clear to me that once I later knew of servant leadership, that was really what they were all about. So I'm very excited that Graham had the interest and took the time to write this book, because I think it's a really important contribution. And so with that, we'll get to a first question, and that's a really basic one, which is, Graham, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And Jeff and Reggie, first of all, I want to thank you. Being a trustee for the Greenleaf Center is one of the great honors of my professional career. And unique in that Butler and Seton Hall are in the same conference, and it didn't hit me till about 5 minutes ago, but we're playing Seton Hall in basketball tonight. So I guess may the best team win, although I'm a little biased. I'll be pulling for the Bulldogs here. The inspiration for the book, writing a book had always been a dream of mine from a young age. But there were really three primary motivations, Jeff. The first one, I've been at Butler 9 years, and every year I saw this growth following two back-to-back Final Fours. If you're a basketball fan, you probably know the story. If you're not, Butler was the smallest school to ever reach the national title game in 2010. Miraculously or not, they made it back in 2011. So back-to-back Final Fours. I came just after those Final Fours, and every year I saw this transformation of what at one time was a small, relatively unknown school in the Midwest. Growth in facilities, growth in applications coming in, growth in philanthropy. And though I'm biased, I thought this is a really unique story. And I started writing several years ago, and my co-author on the book is actually joining us today, Jerry Logan from Boston. He had no tie to Butler. He came to campus in 2017, and he was getting his PhD at Boston College on this notion of what athletic success can mean to a university. He came to campus, we connected, stayed in touch, and around the time of the pandemic last year, I called him and I said, do you want to take your work and mine and start, working on something? I had more time on my hands. My wife will tell you I'm not very good with time on my hands. So this became a project of mine. We developed a manuscript, and I guess the rest, they say, is history. But there were three primary motivations. Butler had done this in a really difficult time for higher education, which I'm sure some of you on the call are aware that, enrollments have been going down, financial difficulties, the questions of whether a liberal arts education, had any value. Secondly, if you're a basketball fan, it's been a bit of a dark time for college basketball. Recruiting scandals, the notion that players just come to campus and stay for a couple months and then depart. And I felt, and again, I'm biased, but Butler was a program, not the only one, but that was doing things the right way. Players came here, graduated. The NCAA was not knocking on our door, which, by the way, it'd be easy for them too, because they're about 5 miles away from us. But we were doing things the right way, and I wanted to showcase that. And then finally, I'm a student of leadership books, strategy books. My wife's still trying to get me to read fiction. Hasn't happened yet. But most of those books are on companies, on the Marriott's, the Starbucks, the Southwest Airlines. You're hard-pressed to take examples from a university, and I thought this was a unique angle as well.
Great. And Graham, how about the title? So as you were writing it, I'm assuming that you were trying to think about the appropriate title and ended up with the Cinderella strategy, game plan behind Butler's rise to prominence. Why the Cinderella strategy? Why that title?
First of all, nailing the title took us about 2 months. I think that was harder than writing the manuscript. Cinderella, for those of you who are aware, is this terminology for the underdog school in the NCAA tournament. The Cinderellas over the years, the George Masons, the Virginia Commonwealths, obviously the Butler. So we like that play, but also the university was a Cinderella story. In the mid-1980s, the leadership here basically said, should Butler basketball even be in Division I? The school had kind of undergone some tough times with their finances, with their enrollments. So not only was the basketball program a Cinderella, an underdog, a long shot to make it, the university was in a way as well. So we liked the Cinderella strategy.
And maybe you could help us understand what the Butler way actually means. And I'd be curious from my own experience of being there when they hadn't yet named it, they hadn't yet decided to try and codify what a Butler way or their own view of servant leadership was. Sort of how did that come about and what is it?
Yeah, the Butler way actually started decades ago with a coach by the name of Tony Hinkle, who coached baseball, football, basketball, and was the athletic director here for about 50 years. 5-0, which is almost unheard of these days. But the Butler way, the mantra is, and I'll just read it here so I get it exactly right, but it demands commitment, denies selfishness, accepts reality, yet seeks constant improvement while promoting the good of the team above self. So the team above self definitely has a servant leadership play here. And then Barry Collier, who is our current athletic director and was once the coach, really defined, came up with 5 principles that help add on to the definition: humility, passion, unity, servanthood, and thankfulness. So that there are many, spins on that, but to me, it again, at the bottom of it goes to servant leadership, putting the organization above self, from a leadership model, putting your employees first. I've got some examples I can share later on here, but whether it be a president or a dean or a coach here, is ensuring that you lead with the notion of those under you first, that those are the ones you want to benefit with your leadership. So the Butler Way really developed into a brand over the years here. It got a lot of fame in 2010 when, fortunately, the NCAA title game was here in Indianapolis, and our players actually went to class that day. And, that story was told over and over again that, wow, this is, school that is sticking to their mission, that they're doing it the right way. But again, I go back to those 5 principles: humility, passion, unity, servanthood, thankfulness, and you're trying to live those 5 out every day.
It's great. Well, we obviously know that Butler Way proved successful for the basketball team with the 2 back-to-back trips to the Final Four, and it was interesting personally as an alumni during those couple of years. Suddenly, people, when you would tell them you went to Butler University, they knew of it, and it was kind of ironic because I'd known, obviously, having been a student and alumni, that it was a great school, but it sort of took basketball to put it on a more national scale. So how did it benefit the university after that?
I think in any endeavor, any niche you're in, you want to stand out. Higher education is a very, very competitive field. There are, I think, 4,200 different colleges and universities across the country, and they all boast about having a beautiful campus and great academics and extracurriculars. The Butler Way helped differentiate Butler in terms of this brand. As I mentioned, those 2 Final Fours, we actually had a company called Borshoff Media Group evaluate what was the earned media attention from those, and they estimated 1.2 billion with a B you'd have to pay 1.2 billion to a marketing agency to get that type of advertising. But not only that number, you got these great stories that came out of it. You got the story of the players going to class. There was another story often told about Brad Stevens going into the locker room, and he was hearing a big ruckus, and he thought teammates were fighting, and they were actually arguing over the answer to a physics problem, which you don't often hear about. But that brand, again, as I mentioned, it has been a bit of a dark time in college basketball of reading, and I won't mention the schools, but if you pay attention, you probably know some of them that have been reputed to pay players. Numerous other scandals that, wow, the Butler Way, this is a team I can get behind. The value from what I do in terms of philanthropy, we've actually had a number of donors migrate who followed other teams, other programs, but loved the notion of pulling for a team that in their mind was playing by the rules, was one of the good guys in college basketball. And a quick anecdote, in 2016, we received our largest gift ever from a couple named Andre and Julia Lacey, $25 million to name our business school. It was a great day if you're a fundraiser. But they had little tie to Butler. Neither Andre nor Julia went here. Children did not attend here. And a big reason they made the gift because they felt their family values, again, of servant leadership, of integrity, character, aligned with Butler's. So there are many different ways to measure it, but if you want to measure just that one, it was worth $25 million to Butler, that Butler Way brand.
Yeah, that's great. How did it affect the culture at Butler? So obviously there was the Butler Way already established. There was a sense of servant leadership and a strong culture at Butler, but how did it evolve after all of that notoriety and impact?
I think it was the glue that helped us keep our identity. I compare the back-to-back Final Fours to maybe a strange analogy, but to the family that wins the Powerball. You have this momentous occasion, your life changes overnight, but you've got a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made, and you may risk losing your identity in the process. You know, we've seen what money and power and fame can do to people. So there was skepticism. There was some skepticism here on campus with faculty and staff of, are we going to change who we are? Are we going to change our identity? Are we were the small, quiet neighborhood school here, and now we're moving into this new galaxy where financial fundraising expectations are going to go up, where the spotlight's going to shine even brighter with moving to the Big East Conference. But from the top down, it was emphasized, we're still going to adhere to this culture. We still are going to have people on this campus who are going to treat people the right way. They're going to lead in a servant leadership style. We're not going to change our culture from a basketball standpoint. I'm not trying to knock the one and done model where a player comes for 1 year and moves on, but we're not going to be that, because academics are really big here. Academics, we have pride in the fact that there's a balance between academics and athletics. So we're not going to change that, but you've got to back that up with your actions. We capped enrollment. We can talk about applications, but we've doubled our applications over the last decade. A big part of that due to the notoriety around the Final Four, but we said we're not going to go beyond 5,000 students. We've always hovered around 4,200, 4,000. We're not going to go beyond that because we don't want to lose who we are. That small class campus size allows for a lot of intimacy, a lot of that personalized leadership and attention. So I think that culture was really important from an internal perspective of reassuring people here that we were not going to change despite hitting the Powerball.
Graham, can you talk about how other organizations, obviously part of the reason that you wrote the book was to tell the story, and it's a great story, but also to potentially stimulate thought on how other organizations might think about applying the lessons of Butler or what they might be able to glean from it. Can you talk about how you think other organizations might benefit from the lessons Butler learned along the way?
Yeah, sure, Jeff. I think there are several. First of all, I think there's the two-sided coin of patience and risk. So in the late 80s, because our book goes well back before those Final Fours, in the late 80s, there was a president, Jeff Bannister, who came together with Barry Collier, and they said, we're gonna go for this basketball strategy. We're gonna put resources in, see if we can regain success as a program that hopefully will help the university as a whole. That was also met with a lot of skepticism. We have a quote in the book from a faculty member who said a number of the faculty laughed. They said, we were thinking a couple years ago of dropping out of D1, and now we're gonna put all our eggs into this basket that we hope will elevate the university. So I think, when an organization thinks about a monumental change or a different direction, they've got to be prepared from the standpoint of having, their employees or their board members or stakeholders question that, have skepticism, but they've got to stick to their beliefs. And then patience. This was not an overnight phenomenon. This was a 30-year, this was a long arc. And it would have been easy when Butler didn't achieve immediate success, which they didn't get back to the NCAA tournament until 8 years after that decision was made, to scrap it, 3 or 4 years in, say, we're not getting the results we need. So I think patience and, risk-taking and patience are huge. As I mentioned, I think not letting success change you. It may change certain elements of your organization or company in terms of more revenue coming in, or a bigger customer base, or more notoriety, but not letting that change what got you there and what your employees value. And so I think that was a big part of Butler's success as well. And then along with that comes a collective acceptance of change. Here at Butler, we had all these great things happening, but we had some challenges. We did slightly increase, I shouldn't say slightly, we increased our enrollment by a couple hundred. And so for faculty, that meant more classes, more responsibilities. From the fundraising side, it was immediately made clear that our metrics were going to go way up in terms of the numbers we were expected to raise. We've added 1.2 million in new square feet over the last decade. So I only half joke about this, but you're coming to campus every day with construction trucks and noise, and you're being displaced. You have all these things. So if you don't have an acceptance of a broad acceptance of change, it's going to be hard to move in the direction you want to. So you've got to get that buy-in, and I think that comes from leadership and communicating from the top down of, hey, we're going to have some growing pains here, but I want to give you a vision of where this is going to take us. I think that's a key lesson. And then I guess one of the final ones I would say is hiring is very important to maintain your culture. I compare us quite a bit with Gonzaga, who just happens to be the #1 team in the country right now. Closest parallel, in my opinion, of another school who used basketball to leverage the university. Well, Gonzaga over the last 25 years has had one coach. Butler's had 6. I say our coaches have been too successful because so many other schools come in and poach them from us. But we made the decision we're going to hire from within. And all of those coaches have either been a former player or an assistant coach who understood the culture. And that we've sustained success from a basketball standpoint. We are struggling a little bit right now, but we sustained that success because those individuals understood the culture. And I think that's important in any organization. We often look at, resumes and what somebody's achieved, or where they went to school, or, what their sales metrics were in a given year. But hiring for culture, which is not always easy in a span of 2 or 3 interviews, but will this individual fit with our culture? I think those 3 stand out for me.
And Graham, I would add one, just for my own anecdote. So I've had the good fortune to be involved in Butler through the years, given the transformational experience I had as an undergraduate student. And from 2018 to 2020, served as a member of the Board of Trustees. And it was interesting during trustee meetings. There's always interest in athletics, especially among alumni or trustees, but it was always in perspective. We never spent an inordinate amount of time on it. There was never concern whether the team was winning or losing. There was always the mission of the university and what we were trying to do overall to serve students. And I thought that was remarkable given the success that Butler had and the way that the 2 trips to the Final Four propelled them into a completely different level. They could have become much more focused on it or obsessed with it, but it's kept in perspective in terms of it's clearly important to Butler and it's clearly been a vehicle, but they haven't lost their identity as part of it, which Graham touched on before. Graham, how about the Butler way and servant leadership? All that is easy when things are going well, but in the 9 years you've been there, I'm sure you've seen some ups and downs, especially in the last year during COVID, where universities have been front and center in trying to respond to the complexity of keeping students, faculty, staff safe, and ensuring parents that their children are going to be cared for when they're away from home during COVID. Maybe you could talk to examples of servant leadership in the COVID environment that you've seen in the last year.
Yeah, I see a number of examples. We've actually used the Butler Way in trying to communicate to our students to think about others when they're making the decision to wear a mask or not to wear a mask, to care about your fellow students, to put others first, to make sure you're wearing a mask at all times, that if you are not feeling well, to think about that, to stay in your room rather than go out. So we've actually used the Butler Way in those communications to our students and faculty and staff about thinking about your own actions and conduct in the pandemic. Also applies to our leadership. I think we've been lucky to have a president, Jim Danko, who's been here 10 years, that I know you know well. Again, you can speak to the Butler Way, but it's your actions that back it up. And one of the first things President Danko did when we could tell our financials were going to get hit like every other university, he took a pay cut, his cabinet took a pay cut. So he said, we need to lead by example and showcase that. Just recently, it was announced that there are going to be no cost of living raises this year, but President Danko said we're going to give everyone on campus a $1,000 bonus. And then maybe what sticks out with me the most is 2 months ago, we got a letter from our president and his cabinet, a letter of encouragement, speaking to how tough the times were. It was a letter, with a lot of empathy ingrained in it. And it had a $10 voucher that you could use on campus for coffee, for lunch. That seems like a small gesture, but it really stuck out with me, where the entire leadership philosophy has been putting the campus first. So those examples really stand out to me during the pandemic, Jeff.
Great, thank you. How about any other things from the book that you would like to emphasize? Give folks a little bit of a preview of what they're in store for when they're reading the book.
Yeah, and I will put a link. I wouldn't be a very good fundraiser salesperson if I didn't put a link to how to order the book in the chat, so I'll do that. But we had several stories that I'll give. The first, going back to servant leadership. Brad Stevens, who many on the call know, currently the Boston Celtics coach. A couple stories in the book stand out to me. After the 2 Final Fours, just about every school in the country came calling who had a vacancy and wanted him to leave Butler and come there. And our chair of the trustees at the time approached him with the president's blessing and said, Brad, we want to renegotiate your contract. What number do you need for us to keep you here at Butler? And rather than giving a number for himself, he said, I want all my assistant coaches to get raises. And I don't think that happens all the time in college basketball. So that stuck out with me. Another story about Brad Stevens is that one of the players on those Final Four teams was a guy named Andrew Smith. He was a tough, rugged, hard-nosed, big man. And upon his graduation at the age of 25, he contracted leukemia and passed away. And his widow created an organization called Project 44, which we're actually sending some of the proceeds to that organization. It's designed to promote bone marrow transplant and awareness of bone marrow registry. And Brad has had several nights at the Celtics, one night per year for a game, where they raise money for Project 44. And so never forgetting, where you came from, the people that helped get you somewhere. I think, sometimes we forget those who helped enable our success. That one stands out. And, I'd say, I guess one last one would be also from Brad Stevens. We do talk about the other coaches, but Brad was the ideal servant leader. In 2013, we played Gonzaga at Hinkle Fieldhouse. It was a nationally televised game. It was sold out, and we won on a last-second shot. And if you see Brad at the end of that game, he's very stoic. He's very calm. And in the press conference, he said, had the shot gone in or not, it really doesn't change the fact that my team is hardworking. They're high character individuals. I love them no matter what, basically. And to me, that was servant leadership as well. I think you see the character of leaders in the good times and bad, but when things don't go your way, I think leaders who don't have that servant first mentality, they may take it out on their employees, they may blame them. I think Brad kept perspective in the wins and the losses.
Graham, one of the questions we have in the chat is, apart from the anticipated success of the book, what was the most satisfying aspect of writing the book and telling this story?
Turning in the final manuscript. No, I think that the satisfying thing was the journey. And I thank my co-authors on the call here. I compared writing the book to running a marathon, which I used to be able to do. But it's a practice of intense discipline where every day you've got to get up, do it, believe in yourself, have a vision that one day somebody's going to, it's going to be published. You really have to have a vision. And the publishing process, I learned a lot about. I started out going 0 for 40, 0 for 40 in terms of my pitches to publishers. It reminded me of my high school dating days. I was getting a lot of rejections and unreturned phone calls, but we finally found one who took a chance on us. And I guess the rewarding part is a book starts from scratch. It starts from really nothing but ideas and building that. And then collaborating with Jerry. Jerry lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and one of the interesting elements of this book is we were not in the same room at all. We haven't even been able to, toast a beer or two, in celebration. We've been long distance. So I think the partnership and working with him and just working from the standpoint of not knowing what was going to happen, but believing in this story, believing in the Butler story, I think is most satisfying.
Right. We have another great question, which is, how do you get students and staff and faculty to buy into servant leadership when things aren't going well?
I think again, it's leading by example. And I would go back to those examples I gave during the pandemic. I think if the president didn't, say we're going to take pay cuts, and that's happened. Actually, there were some stories out there of highly, highly paid college football coaches who refused to take pay cuts. Well, what does that do for morale, on campus? If you're a leader, a CEO, and you're making a lot of money, and we've all been hit hard in the pandemic, and you say, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't set the right tone, in my opinion, for your employees and your organizations. The communications, which have shown empathy, I think have been really important to show that we care. We care about you here. And we haven't talked about it much, but the racial unrest in this country, our president took a lead on that right away, reaching out, taking several initiatives to address that. I guess the bottom line for me, Jeff, is it's action. We can talk about servant leadership. We can talk about doing things the right way and caring about our employees, but it's what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis that matters.
Yeah, I would have just one anecdote on the student side. So our oldest daughter is a sophomore at Butler, and it was interesting when they obviously sent everyone home last March, and then as they got ready to reopen in the fall, and Butler Butler's commitment was to try and be on campus, they were very clear about communicating to students their expectations and their responsibility in supporting one another as part of the Butler community to be successful in being on campus. And what I saw in my own daughter was buy into the fact that that she was part of a larger community. It wasn't just about herself. And her and her suite mates, she's part of a suite of 8, they were incredibly careful, more so than I would ever expect from 18 to 21-year-olds at that age at college. And she was very careful. Like, there were weekends she didn't want to come home. She didn't necessarily want me to take her out to dinner because she felt a commitment and a obligation to the rest of her suite mates and students. And I think Butler did a really nice job in shaping that environment and helping to guide students on how to model the way.
Absolutely.
We have another question. In your role of raising money for Butler, how do you use principles of servant leadership to encourage donations?
A big part of fundraising is storytelling. And when I was writing the book, I recalled a lot of stories I've shared with donors. And, telling the story of Andre and Julia Lacey, of making this large gift because their values aligned with the Butler way. And we actually had another gentleman who was so inspired by that, he wrote $1 million check. He was a friend of the Laceys and was so inspired by what they did. So a lot of storytelling, but a lot of it, was enhanced by the stories that were being told by the media. Again, I can't emphasize enough how many people still talk about the Butler players going to class on the day of the national championship game. They still talk about that. One example in the book is a couple by the name of Larry and Bobby Canada. Prior to 2007, they had virtually no tie with Butler. They were alums of another unnamed school in the state, and they followed that program. And they became disenchanted with that program a bit because of some of the things that were going on. And they started attending Butler games. They saw firsthand the Butler way. And we've got a quote in the book about how people treated them when they came in, that they weren't just looked at as season ticket holders or donors, that they were looked on as people. And in the decades since, they've become some of our largest donors. And over the last 7 or 8 years, I could probably count on my hand the number of games, home and away, they've missed. So people came to campus. Jerry actually says this. He came to campus having heard about the Butler way, and he was skeptical himself. And when interviewing 30 people over the span of a couple trips, he saw that it was real. It was a real thing. So again, going back to fundraising, other than praying a lot for gifts to come in, I do a lot of storytelling about how the Butler way is lived out here.
Graham, we have a question about the influence of John Wooden and his leadership of UCLA basketball during his time, how that might have affected the Butler way in any way. Do you know of a connection, or was that part of your research in any way, shape, or form?
He's in the book. Interestingly, so John Wooden is from Martinsville, Indiana, which is about 30 miles south of Indianapolis. And he played in the very first state championship game in 1927 in Hinkle Fieldhouse, which is our arena. And Tony Hinkle got to know John Wooden over the course of his career. And John Wooden had, his philosophy was called the Pyramid of Success. And I think some of those principles did shape the Butler way in terms of, again, servant leadership, of humility, having humility. He won 10 national titles, but was known to be a pretty humble person. So I think taking that approach that he had, I think one of my favorite John Wooden sayings is make every day your masterpiece. And again, going back to actions, what you do on a day-to-day basis, I think is so important. again, I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's not what you say, it's what you do. And that quote from Wooden always sticks out to me of make every day your masterpiece and trying to get better and to improve, which is another tenet of the Butler Way.
Graham, can you comment to, have a question on, even if you're not in an official leadership role, can you still lead through servant leadership or influence through servant leadership?
Yeah, I reference another book by a couple friends of ours, Jerry Toomer and Craig Caldwell, called The Catalyst Effect. And the premise of that book is that you don't have to be a leader just because your title says so. Some of the great leaders I've seen in my career were not at the top of the pyramid in terms of their role. And I think you can lead from within. You can be a leader. Some of our assistant coaches at Butler have been some of our best leaders. They weren't the head coach, but they were great leaders themselves. Again, I see we have a person who works in the maintenance department here. With all due respect, maybe one of the lower paid employees on campus, has the most amazing attitude, a hello and a big smile, every time you see this person on campus, a kind word, and that to me is servant leadership. So I do think it can be anyone. You have to have that confidence. You have to have, most importantly, care for other people, which I think that in a nutshell is the foundation of servant leadership.
Right. Thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Before I turn it back over to Reggie, Graham, any closing comments, any shameless plug for your book, anything else you'd like to share with our participants?
Well, I'm going to put a link here in the chat. I would say we've been really fortunate to have some great testimonials in the book, and that's another lesson try to emphasize is how do you gain respect from your competitors. Right, I think about the way it's in this endorsement might hurt me with the Butler community because he was the opposing coach in 2010, but Mike Sheffield endorsed the book, Al Ackerman, the commissioner of the East, Greg Popovich, coach of the Spurs, who is a servant leader in my opinion. There's a neat story I read in the book. So again, a lot of these testimonials, what's impressive, I think is, it's not necessarily a reflection of me asking them, it's their respect for Butler. When I asked Mike Sheffield, I got a response in 3 days. Beyond to do it, I have such great respect for Butler. Probably didn't hurt his nephew and Butler, but a lot of these reach out like a day. These are very busy people. A day later, absolutely, I'm on board, and I think I'm proud of that because that illustrates the respect that the community has for Butler. But I appreciate it. I'd say Jerry and I are not getting rich off the book. We want to spread the stories. We think again, there just aren't a lot of books, periodicals where you can learn from university. I told you earlier. Universities right along look a bit like dinosaurs, how fast they moved and innovate. I don't think we've been done that way. I think there are other schools who are examples of pioneers, innovation, and taking risks. So if you're a fan of leadership, strategy, culture, and looking not to read about it, really great company from the private sector, I feel this would be a good book for you.
Right. Well, Graham, not only writing the book, but for taking the time to share all of this afternoon. Great story. Really outstanding. And with that, I will turn it back over to Reggie for closing comments.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, for moderating. Thank you, Graham, for taking time to share your journey and insight on the Buckway lessons that are applicable to any organization. Again, to all of our guests, check out the link. If you look in your chat feature, you see the link for obtaining a copy of this must read. This is a powerful story, and to all of our guests, we hope that we'll see you next month, which will have Howard Barr, Trust Maritime of the Center, former president of Starbucks International, and author of It's Not About Coffee. So join us on March 25th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be sending out notices to that effect. Also, you can learn more about servant leadership. We have openings for our March 26th Academy class, Foundation for Servant Leadership. Visit us at greenleaf.org. You can register for those opportunities. And of course, it's not too late to register for the International Summit for Servant Leaders. Visit us at servantleadersummit.org. Many thanks again to Jeff Blade. Super thanks to Graham Honaker, and congrats on this enormous accomplishment. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you soon.